So we thought this was going to be our main story today, and then Teddy Scheifler wrecked the show, which is fine. It just we had other stuff to talk about. Jeff Bezos apparently out on the Commanders. We've covered it all show long. Teddy, the guy who broke the story, joined us at 4:30. Highly recommend using the rewind feature on that if you want to check it out or checking out the podcast on demand. Also, it's up on YouTube, youtube.com/@Craig Hoffman. You can rewind to the full show on YouTube on 980. Basically, we got you covered. But we thought it was going to be the continued banter around the Washington Wizards, which started with Spencer Dinwiddie. Do we have the Dinwiddie audio, Anthony? Do you have it up over there? I'm not seeing it in the folder. Am I silly? Oh, I see what you did. You put it in the Real Things with a Real Things label. Got it. So this is very long. We're gonna play parts of it here. Spencer Dinwiddie responding to banter about Kyle Kuzma, or from Kyle Kuzma about Spencer Dinwiddie after the Mavs and the Wizards played earlier this year. The Wizards won. At the time, the Mavs were pretty good. Obviously, they went sideways. Dinwiddie ultimately got traded. Kuz is looking for a big contract. These guys were teammates last year. They couldn't trade Dinwiddie fast enough. That's the setup. Here's what Dinwiddie said on a show called Run It Back. It's Michelle Beadle and Chandler Parsons and Shams Charania on FanDuel TV.
Oh, man. Didn't I just say I was petty?
Yeah, I know. Yes, please.
So here's the thing, right? And obviously I spent some time in D.C. with Kuz. What's that thing Draymond just said where he said insecurity is loud?
Yep.
Right? So basically here's what happened, right? We lost to them. I was on the Mavericks. And obviously we have a MVP caliber guy and we're trying to be a championship caliber team. Just went to the Western Conference Finals, et cetera, et cetera. So I make a statement about, we need to be better. Understanding the culture and how games are kind of played in DC and saying, that's an unacceptable loss in that fashion. He decides to respond because I guess he felt like it was a shot at him. And I wanted to respond. My agent told me to stand down, that we had, bigger fish to fry, things to do, get to the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. But, now I'm not in that environment. I'm in the playoffs. He's not. And, to address no, I'm just saying to address a socialite, right? Like there's a lot of guys in the NBA that really pour their heart and soul into basketball, are willing to do whatever it takes to win. There are a lot of guys that have different things that drive them and motivate.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. You kind of get the gist. Spencer Dinwiddie doesn't like Kyle Kuzma. He thinks he's motivated by other stuff. He called him a socialite. He said he's in the playoffs, or I'm in the playoffs, he's not, etc. Well, I'm going to let Kyle Kuzma respond for himself on this. Kuz on Twitter. Okay, so since I'm famous, Spencer Dinwiddie, let me give you all some clout. I'm usually unbothered by things on the internet, but I will not allow this delusional guy to continue to talk about my teammates and I. 1, insecurity. He says, here's a thread, which just cracks knuckles. Let's go. Insecurity is loud. The Wizards and I have so much real estate on Din Bleep Island. I can't say the pun that Kyle uses here. This guy got signed by a team, $60 million, and was traded before the season was over. What in the world have you won in this league? You've been bounced around like a basketball, my boy, which is, a good reminder that Kuz has a ring. Dinwiddie does not. He made the conference finals with the Mavericks last year. I believe that's the farthest he's ever gone in his career. 3, you can thank KD and Kyrie for spearheading the 34 wins before the All-Star break. They're 11-13 after the break for your playoffs. I think that is a fantastic point by Kuz. I cannot believe Dinwiddie said that. Like, people weren't going to check that. Dinwiddie also later says, hey, I'm the second option behind Mikal Bridges, and we're doing great. We're in the playoffs. And Kuz goes, second option? More like second point guard. My man, I watched you for 2 months at the end of your Wizards tenure being the second option, averaging 8, 4, and 4. Sounds good, but glad you're hooping now. And to be fair to Dinwiddie, he is playing better. He's averaging 16 points a game with the Nets, but a second option on a championship team, Kyle Kuzma's got a lot better chance than that. And then 5, he goes, and yup, I got a bag coming. Stop hating. And last but not least, the only way you'll ever be worth your contract is if the NBA finally gives you your wish of getting paid in crypto. Check the markets. Has a stock market emoji trending down. Enjoy the clicks. Go Sixers, who the Nets play in the first round. Kuz wraps up a little bit later saying, I just don't like the false narratives with me. People use the way I dress or my celebrity against me. Don't let my confidence offend your insecurities. I'm a very driven person and strive to get better like I have been my entire career. If you knew my story, you'd rock with me more. I think Kuz comes out of this looking way better than Spencer Dinwiddie. Honestly, Spencer Dinwiddie kind of comes out of this looking like a clown. I think Dinwiddie makes some interesting points, and there are some valid points about the Washington Wizards, and I think Dinwiddie, who's been around some winners and on some winning teams, saw some things that he didn't like the way business was being done. Clearly, he thought Kuz was a problem there. But I think if you watch this team night in, night out, like, Dinwiddie stunk here. He was awful. And part of that was he was still coming back from injury. He's a better player than he showed here. But he's going to have to eat that. The reality is, Spencer Dinwiddie was a bad Washington Wizards basketball player, and that didn't have anything to do with Kyle Kuzma on the floor, nevertheless off the floor, the way that he dresses, etc. Number two, human players are allowed to have lives. You don't have to be boring. Like, I think trashing Kuz for the way that he dresses or saying he's a socialite because he dates a model and likes to go to fashion shows on occasion, like, this dude also averaged 20 points a game this year and has seemingly gotten better every year of his career. And to say, like Dinwiddie did later, that, like, oh, he can't be the third star on a winning team, that's why the Lakers traded him. No, like, the Wizards wanted something in return back for Russell Westbrook. They didn't want to just give up Westbrook, and Kuz was kind of the prize piece at the center of that. And so it wasn't, like, one, to put credence in what the Lakers think about roster building when it comes to stars is stupid, because they've been terrible. When they finally gave up on Westbrook and got a bunch of guys who are much, much, much worse in terms of, Q rating and name value, they saved their freaking season. But for Kuz, like, I think Kuz responded in all the smart ways, left some of the other stuff unsaid. I think the crypto shot is hilarious, because Dinwiddie was Mr. Crypto for a while. And it's like, yeah, that seemed like a poor investment, like the Wizards' investment in you. And, hopefully for you, crypto will bounce back like your career has since you left Washington. But for right now, like, I just, the fact that it's almost 2 years later and you can't keep the Wizards' name out of your mouth. I know you were asked about it, but you were also asked about it because you brought it up again on a different podcast. Like, next time you're asked about it, just say, like, yeah, like, I didn't have a great time there. We had some disagreements. I don't really feel like talking about this anymore, and move on. And I think for Kuz, like, it shows a level of loyalty that's appreciated by this organization. I think it's no coincidence that the team as a whole seemed to get along a lot better this year without Dinwiddie here and a couple of other guys that were problematic in that locker room last year. However, the most damning comments that I've seen today made about the Washington Wizards were not made by Spencer Dinwiddie. They were actually made by Corey Kispert. They weren't meant to be damning necessarily, but these are from earlier in the week. I just didn't see them till today. And if you want to talk about the actual problems with the Washington Wizards, don't get caught up in the hoopla of Kuzma versus Dinwiddie. Listen to what Corey Kispert had to say about this team this season and what needs to change going forward. We'll play you that audio next on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So we just talked a little bit about the Spencer Dinwiddie, Kyle Kuzma back and forth. Dinwiddie on FanDuel TV, yappity yap. Kuz on Twitter, tweetity tweet. But to me, the most interesting thing I've seen about the Wizards culture this week actually were some quotes from the exit interview day on Monday that I just saw earlier this morning. And it was put out by Hoop District, our guy Neil DeLaw, who joined the show on Monday to help us do the Wizards postmortem. And it came from Corey Kispert. And Anthony was able to hunt down the audio. So bravo, excellent producing, Sir Ant. And it talked about accountability and the reality that they lacked that this year in a major problematic way. Here's Corey Kispert, who obviously came on really strong at the end of the year, but is a part of this 35-win team.
It's hard to do the right thing all the time, and when in tough conversations and accountability and being uncomfortable in conversations is like it's a hard thing to do over and over and over again. It's a much easier thing to just kind of let things slide. And when you get a team full of guys who don't really care about their feelings getting hurt and just want to win, that's when you can unlock something really, really special. And that's something that, is not unique to our team. There are teams across the entire league that struggle with that too. And I think it's a majority. It's not, there's a minority of teams that are okay with accountability, and, it's a commitment to doing the right thing over and over and over again. And it can be boring and it can be tough, but it's just what you have to do. It's the price of winning.
So to me, there's kind of two things at play here. One is a leadership element, and two is a personal responsibility element. The first is the personal responsibility. If everyone holds themselves accountable to do the right things, then you don't have to hold each other accountable. But then there's the leadership. This is why multi-level leadership is important. It's why it's important that you have players who set example, and by their sheer example, by the way they go about their work, everyone else is encouraged to do the right thing. Then you have people who say, who are on guys and hold you accountable. And I honestly don't know who those people are for the Washington Wizards. That's not to say they don't exist, and it's not to say that guys didn't get on each other, but it's not like Draymond Green is running around barking orders in the way that they are in Golden State, and that Steph Curry isn't the hardest working guy on the team and he's the best player. So if Steph's doing his work, what's your excuse not Steph Curry, one of the 10 greatest players possibly ever to lace up a pair of sneakers? I don't even know why I said possibly. He's got to be top 10 all time. That's a different discussion for a different day. I don't want to set the internet on fire. It's why your coaches, hey, we have a standard. This is what it is. And it's assistant coaches, it's head coaches, it's your GM and whoever from the front office is around the team on a regular basis. Like, you need that leadership at all levels. So there is a culture of accountability, not one guy going, hey, we got to get extra shots up. Hey, we got to run this right. Hey, we got to do this. Because if that's the case, that voice gets old real fast. There has to be a standard of excellence that exists. And Corey's right. That is not something that is unique to the Wizards. But to have that recognition for a second-year guy like Kispert is, I don't think speaks well. I think that is, an organizational failure in a way, even if it's a common one throughout the league, that Tommy and his staff and Wes and how, his staff handles, both the players and how they operate the operation is something they're going to have to look at. I don't say that as like it's a fireable offense. How dare they? It means they suck at their jobs. Like, it just means it's a major problem and they've got to fix it. Otherwise, the nature of the league is there will be other people doing those jobs, let's say a year from now, 2 years from now. Wider thoughts on the Wizards' shortcomings this year from Corey Kispert. And I thought all these comments were super interesting when he made them earlier in the week. I just wound up happening to see them today.
I think it started early on. Like, the reason why we couldn't fix these problems was because they're deep rooted in what we've been doing for the year. It's not just like a quick and easy fix like you guys seen. Like, it's hard to change these things sometimes. And I think it's a mix of, accountability from player to player, from coach to player, from player to coach within our organization. I think that needs to be addressed and fixed, and we're, from what I've seen, we're taking steps to do that. And then I also think it's a little bit of like a identity issue. And it's easy to point fingers and, put blame on injuries and circumstance and, other teams figured it out, and there has to be a standard to which we play stylistically and aggression and things like that, no matter who's on the floor. And with our lineups, with our so many different lineups we put on the floor throughout the year because of those injuries, not having anything to kind of fall back on and really trust as far as this is the way we're going to play all year long, no matter what. Kind of did us in. You saw a lot of just kind of floating around and guys doing whatever. When in reality, that's just not what wins. So we're definitely going to take some steps to improve that this offseason and be better next year.
To me, that's the most important thing that was said. That last half of that answer that says we don't have an identity, we don't have a way that we play, is probably the best description of a damning of Wes Unseld and the coaching staff that I've seen. But it is certainly deeper than that, in that it has tentacles in the front office and it has a lot of tentacles up and down the roster. It's not like they didn't give them a plan, but how well do you execute it? How dedicated are you? Or do you just get out there and kind of stand in the corner and let Brad cook, let KP cook, let Kuz cook? Or do you have a system of offense? What makes the Warriors, and I hate always using them as an example, but like the best teams over time, like if I tell you, hey, how did the 2014 Spurs play? You know. They were a driving kick team that hunted corner threes, and then if all else failed, they had Tim Duncan on his last legs, but still cooking. Obviously, the earlier Spurs teams played through Tim Duncan and the pick and roll with Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. The Lakers and the Bulls with Shaq and Kobe and Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, all coached by Phil Jackson, they have the triangle offense. The Warriors, to come back to this team, have this incredible whirling dervish motion offense where there's split cuts and off-ball screens and on-ball screens. And, when it gets tight in playoff series, they run the Steph Draymond pick and roll and try to generate 4-on-3s, or they can dump it down to Draymond in the post and but like the motion is the defining thing. If I talk to you, a Wizards fan who's watched many of the games, and go, hey, what's their offense? Can you describe it? What's it look like? What do they do? Well, when Kispert's in there, he's running around like crazy. And we talked about this with Glenn a bunch. We talked about this with Christy. We talked about this with everybody that came on. Like, the way Corey plays offense, to me, is the way that NBA offense should be played. Basketball should be played in general. Lots of player movement, because what happens when you move one piece is the rest of the pieces have to move to adjust to keep the proper spacing and floor balance. And that doesn't happen when you watch one guy go ISO. It allows the defense to lock in on exactly what they're doing. And by the way, the Wizards don't have the shooting, basically outside of Kispert, to just stand there around a Brad Beal creating and space the floor and know, hey, if someone double teams, you can fire the ball across the court and get a good three, because if it winds up in most of the players' hands out there, the defense isn't that scared. Kispert, Porzingis, Kuz on some nights, but like, it's not like they got a multiple 40% three-point shooters out there. They kind of got one, and it's Kispert. And then you have a bunch of other guys in the high 30s that are okay, that are fine, but not terrifying in the way that Kispert was. So that's not to say like, oh, Corey Kispert's the greatest basketball player on the team, or Corey Kispert's amazing. Just when he was out there and like he was more of a focal point on certain stretches of offense, they actually played a way that was identifiable. Other than that, it was like, let's run some pick and roll with these guys and see what happens. And you'd have nights where Kristaps Porzingis was really effective in that pick and roll, and they'd win the basketball game. You also have halves where he was really effective and scored 20 points and then wouldn't get the ball or wouldn't score again, wouldn't take a shot until 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Why? Because you don't have a consistent brand of play. And that is ultimately, if they are going to build around this core, what they need to figure out moving forward. Who are we? What is it that we do? How do we play? What is our pace? And then in the half court, how do we generate offense? Because the lack of consistency in that is, I think, the defining problem, or the 1B of defining problems with 1A is they're not a good defensive team, which obviously impacts a lot of things as well. I would say this too, combining what Corey's saying here and what Tommy said earlier in the week about Brad probably shifting more off ball in the future. I think a Warriors-esque type of motion, a mini version of that, maybe not quite as whirling dervish, because you also don't have a Draymond playmaker that you can rely on, although they hope Xavier Cooks can be helpful in that regard, but he ain't Draymond Green. But that you have two 40% three-point shooters with Kispert, with Beal on the floor together, moving around. Davis is a good cutter. Have some of these guys, and Porzingis also is a very unique player, and Kuz, who's a great cutter. Like, if you could start getting those guys in motion, now you're talking about the potential to be a top 12, let's say, NBA offense. Last thing for Kispert, because it did sound, actually, I'll play this after the break, and then we'll get into real things. Because there was one comment in particular that sounded almost like a little bit of a shot at Tommy Shepard. There's no way Corey meant it that way. I don't think Corey was like, hey, Tommy said we had injuries, and I just don't think that's an excuse. But he did say, like, injuries can't be an excuse. Other teams figured it out. And Tommy kind of backed off some of the injury stuff and said it wasn't good enough on Monday. So I think that should be noted as well. But he was asked to expand on the injury comment. Play that sound for you next, and then we will do real things, real people said, into real microphones. It's the Hoffman Show, 4 to 7 each and every day right here on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Let's tell you first, though, what's trending. The lack of culture of accountability, the lack of an identity, and got a good question from Commanders Prime. Rocky on Twitter says, the Warriors and other teams have the personnel to operate the modern offenses. Do the Wizards? Like, yeah, they do. They have, the offense isn't the problem. Like, they have a incredibly skilled unicorn-style big in Porzingis. They have Kispert, who's a great shooter. They have Beal, who's an all-around, do everything, can do everything offensive player. Kuz is a really versatile, skilled offensive player. Like, yeah, they should be able to run around and create some havoc and do some things. I mean, I guess the question is, like, are these guys basketball IQs high enough to do all this? That's I guess, a valid question, because otherwise, why aren't they? I do think at times I watch them and go, this isn't a very smart basketball team. It just is. These guys, they're getting on by the fact that they're incredibly skilled, where the Warriors, and what elevates them is they have the combination of skill and intellect, and obviously they have extreme skill. But I think that would be the question. But I would say the answer is yeah. Like, they do have it. They can be much better. Let's put it that way. They need to supplement some of the pieces better and have more of an identity, because that also gives people confidence. If you know exactly not only what you're doing, but what you're not doing, that can be empowering. As for Kispert, he was asked, can you expand on the injury thing? Because unlike some others who have said, like, injuries played a huge role, Kispert says, like, yeah, they definitely mattered, but other teams figured it out. We had to do that. We didn't. So here's Corey Kispert responding to a request to expand on that.
I mean, injuries are a part of the game, and it happens to everybody. It happened to me this year. It happened to Brad. It happened to Kuz. It happened to KP. Like, it happens to everybody. And going in that there's going to be injuries, and part of your contingency plan as a team is to budget for that. And guys need to, part of that is what happens before the injuries occur. Guys need to know exactly what they're supposed to do on the floor at all times. And, when guys do get hurt, there's a shift in what you need to do on the floor. And there's got to be better communication amongst players about that, from player to player, and communication from coaches to player and players to coaches. And it's across the board. And I just think that a lot of the times this year when guys dropped out, everyone kind of looked around and was like, okay, it's my time to go. And I was guilty of that too. And when in reality, there just needs to be a collective effort to reassess, in the moment. Okay, this guy's hurt. What needs to change? You change this, I'll change this. We all change that. And you can absorb injuries. And teams make, you see teams that win 50, 60 games a year. They're really good at absorbing injuries, and that's part of it.
I'm trying real quick to look up Corey Kispert's major in college. I don't see it, but I'm going to guess he's like an organizational communications major. Talking about managing up, managing down. I got to ask, we're going to try to get Corey Kispert on the show this summer. That's Anthony. Write that down in the notebook. We got to get Corey Kispert on the show. He was my favorite interview at Media Day, and we never had him back on the show, and that was a terrible job out of us. So we're going to try to have Corey Kispert soon.
This is Wes Unseld Jr.
Beal, left wing outside the arc, stops, takes a three. It's there.
You listen to The Hoffman Show on Team 980.
Assassin-like.
The Odyssey app.